Earlier this week, we witnessed history as the conflict in Ukraine got closer to war. By the time this video is up, I wouldn't be too surprised if war was already underway. Such an event is a very somber and dark thing to imagine, and I contemplated making a video talking about something related to modern Russian or Ukrainian history, but I just couldn't think of what to make in light of stuff going on without just getting straight into it, especially since anything could happen at any moment. So rather than dance around it in that way, I thought I'd make a short video discussing a debunked historical concept that is important to learn because events like those in Ukraine serve as a reminder to why the concept was debunked in the first place. In 1989, an American political scientist named Francis Fukuyama wrote an article titled "The End of History?" In it, Fukuyama summarizes the political and historical narratives of the 20th century as liberal democracy and market economies facing rivalries in fascism and communism. Fascism was defeated during World War II, and in 1989 it seemed communism, or at least the nations claiming to adhere to those ideals, were close to collapsing. Indeed, just a few months later, after that essay was written, the Berlin Wall fell. Famously, in 1991, the Soviet Union fell apart, ending the Cold War. Fukuyama then expanded his essay into a book in 1992 entitled The End of History and the Last Man. In it, he further explains the previous ideas by stating that liberal democracy had won the battle of ideologies, and that while there would be future problems, he thinks that ultimately any solvable problems would be solved within the spans of those ideas. He emphasized that he does not think liberal democracy is perfect, but rather that it's simply the best option we've got in terms of both providing prosperity and liberty to the people. Now, so far this just sounds like it's basically an opinionated political essay in support of liberal democracy and market economics, but there is another key feature that during the 90s sort of took off. The reason why history ended is that since all future problems are now solvable by liberal democracy, and that there are no other competing ideologies, Fukuyama asserts that this means every country will be tied together to where problem-solving will, in theory, severely reduce the chances of large-scale international violent conflict. These ideas became very popular. The fall of the Soviet Union led to this weird 1990s optimism that, just like the fall of the Empire in Star Wars, we were now basically at the happy ending. The good guys won, and whatever happens in the future is nothing to worry about because the evil is defeated, end credits. Obviously, history and geopolitics are never that cut and dry for a number of reasons. But in spite of that, there was still a general consensus that the West has won, and now it was just about the rest of the world catching up. The 1990s were not free of war, as shown by the bloody breakup of Yugoslavia, but it demonstrated NATO intervening in the conflict and there wasn't some new opposing ideology interfering. The real wake-up call that ended up destroying this idea of history ending was, of course, 9/11. Not only did the attack on the Twin Towers bring the idea of a new form of terrorist-based warfare to the forefront, but it also brought attention to Al-Qaeda's brand of religious extremism in the form of Islamic fundamentalism. Now there's suddenly a new opposing ideology. The long-dragging wars that would soon follow in Afghanistan and Iraq, while not as severe as World War II, and not as existentialist feeling as the Cold War, were still major wars nonetheless. The idea that there'd be no opposing ideas or major conflicts was now firmly disproven. Since then, the geopolitical rise of China and the return of the geopolitical power of Russia have further demonstrated that the geopolitical cycle of events hasn't come to an end after all. I don't want to end a video on a gloom and doom bummer note. By all means, I think that there has been some progress made since the Cold War, and we still likely won't have a World War II level conflict again, but I think it's important to understand that the idea of history ending, the idea wars and conflicts would end overnight, is a bit naive. The best you can do is study history and at least be prepared for it. I'm Emperor Tigerstar, and I'll see you guys next time.